everyone to the new season of the Michelle Pascoe Hospitality Podcast for 2026. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast. It's my 8th year, and once again, we have an amazing lineup of podcast guests for you. The style, once again, this year is we'll be working on leadership, then about the customer experience, the excellence, and all those things that I absolutely love. And then the third month will be focusing on community. And then the fourth month, we go back and we start again for leadership. Then every week in each of those months, I'll have 3 podcast guests. And in the 4th week of that month, or that last week of the month, I'll be doing a roundup of what those 3 guests have shared with me and yourselves as my beautiful listeners, but also for me to inject my thoughts and insights as well. Thank you so much once again for joining me for 2026. Whether I'm in your ears as you take a run or do some exercise or sit in your car, or perhaps you've subscribed to me on YouTube, which I found is an amazing way. Now our downloads and our subscribers has risen exponentially since going on to YouTube in 2025. So please, if you listen to this podcast, share it with others. I would love for you to do a review. It therefore allows the opportunity for others to find my podcast, but also to hear from the expertise and insights from my guests. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe, and that will also grow for others to hear about what we're doing and what my podcast guests are offering. Wishing you all the best for 2026. It's going to be a fantastic year. I've got lots of things lined up. It's a big year for business, and it will be, I'm sure, a big year for you. Take care. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast. But before I introduce my amazing guest for today, in this session, we may discuss sensitive topics, including mental health, bullying, and some of the serious impacts and consequences of unsafe workplace behaviours. We appreciate that this might be upsetting for some people. Please note you can take a break at any time, and remember we have many Australian emotional support agencies that you can reach out to if you feel you will ever need any support, such as Lifeline, 1-800-RESPECT, the Black Dog Institute, and of course those that are listening from around the world, please connect with those similar agencies and institutions if you feel that there is a need, because that's most important. So now I will introduce our amazing guest. Karen Maher is a leading Australian WHS and cultural consultant and keynote speaker. Her experience spans over 20 years, initially as an employment and safety lawyer in Australia and the United Kingdom. She is founder of Smart Culture, an Australian organisation committed to creating safer and more respectful workplaces. Over her career, she has worked on hundreds of real-life cases from all parts of the process, including legal, investigations, advisory, and process improvement. Karen works with a diverse range of government and private organisations and has an extensive experience both working in a hospitality and with hospitality in her work with Smart Culture. Karen is passionate about making workplaces safer and enhancing cultures. She focuses on the fundamentals of great culture and leadership to make this happen. And on a personal note, I've known Karen now for many years. We've been part of the $1 Million Mastermind with Leanne Christie with Ovation Speaking Bureau, and we've come to know a lot about each other. So it's just so wonderful, Karen, to have you join us today. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. It's fantastic to be here.
So look, let's start. We've got a number of questions, but of course, as my listeners know, we can go in all sorts of directions. But please remember, I did advise you that warning before we get into this episode that is there for you. Karen, you started in hospitality as a young worker and experienced sexual harassment. How has this shaped the work you do today and the creation of Smart Culture?
Yeah, that's true, Michelle. When I started in hospitality when I was about 15, but when I was in my early 20s, so around 21, I was sexually harassed by an executive chef in a function center. And it really has shaped everything, to be honest. And I think it's, really why I'm doing what I do today. Going through that as a young worker was really, really hard. It was a really hard time, and it was a very different world back then.
Mm.
The real lack of support and the behavior that I experienced, it just was ongoing and it just kept escalating. And really, in hospitality at that time, there was really that whole concept of it felt a bit like, oh, this is just the way it is,
Mm.
this is
Yeah.
the way it is. And so, yeah, the behavior kept going. And then there was a last straw, quite serious incident. And then after that, I just really felt like there was no support. No one really was listening. No one certainly did anything about it. And after I left that organization, I decided to go back to law school. I'd actually left law school because I really wanted to strengthen my voice. And that really
Mm.
led me into employment law and safety law. And yeah, nowadays with smart culture, I really work with a lot of organizations in that proactive space to try to change things and get people
Yes.
thinking a bit differently,
Mm.
and focusing, it doesn't matter what industry, but I do work quite a lot with hospitality on, focusing on keeping people safe and respected, which of course drives that better workplace anyway. So all good there.
It does. And when we think about it, that was, a number of years ago, but not all that long ago. And what's so sad is we still see perpetrators happening again today, even in very large and well-known organizations. And
Yeah.
all I think, my gosh, if that's happening in big organizations, what aren't we hearing about that's not getting to the media? So I think it's so important to have this conversation today. And I do thank you for that. What have you observed though across venues and groups that you work with now, that is different from the hospitality culture that you entered as a teenager? Is it getting better? Do we have more informed people and more people taking that responsibility and accountability, both as leaders as well as those if they were thinking about it, oh, I am being watched?
Well, Michelle, I think that there is a change, and certainly I'm seeing this in Australia, that's for sure. We are not there yet. Like I know when I started Smart Culture about 10 years ago, there was a lot of pushback in this space working with hospitality. There's a lot of, we don't need to be here.
Mm.
Hospitality is different. But I'm really seeing a huge shift. And I mean, in Australia, we have quite strong legal duties in this space now. We have a new positive duty to be preventing and eliminating sexual harassment from our workplaces for every organisation that has duties under the legislation. So that's really pushed for change. But I think just there's been this evolve, a real, I guess, evolution with regard to, employers and just again looking at this from a safety point of view. So not just looking at that physical safety side of things, like people getting hurt from being burnt in the kitchen, working around electricity and water and things like that, but just the impact of these behaviors and what they can actually do to your workplace culture and can do to your organization. And as you mentioned, Michelle, we're still having quite serious cases. We are definitely not there yet. I see, from the better, let's call them the better employers and the ones who are really shifting in this space, they're focusing on it. They
Yes.
understand, yeah, they really understand the importance of, educating their leaders. Their senior leaders understand what their duties and they get what they need to do. So it all sort of starts from there, and it
Mm.
really has that ripple effect. And there's a lot of proactive work that's done, and making sure leaders understand what to do if something happens.
Mm.
Working on risk management. We have to be, with our safety duties, we must be proactive and looking at how we can, control hazards like sexual harassment, like bullying and things like that. So the better organizations with hospitality are the ones senior leaders are switched on. They're being proactive. They understand the importance of this, and it all flows from there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And it's for all genders, all nationalities, and all age groups, isn't it? It's just not
Yeah.
one particular space. So it it impacts everybody, and not only the person that it may be directed to, but the others around it, whether am I the whistleblower and speaks up for them, or because they're laughing, they mustn't mind it. So would I be silly in saying something to her? So it really does impact a lot more than just the one or two people that are involved. Would I be correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
One of the cases, and again, working with a lot of different organizations, one of the cases that I was involved in last year, the person who was the bystander, who to the poor behavior, to the sexual harassment, 6 months down the track, is continues to be more affected than the person who actually experienced the behavior. So it really does. It really impacts everybody around the team, and it really lowers that morale as well, that trust and safety and confidence. But yeah, certainly. And again, it can absolutely affect anyone. Yeah.
Which I think it's understanding that it's not just one or two. It's such a broad group, that not only in the workplace but also outside of the workplace, because it impacts their lifestyle and what happens when they take home as well, and what they continue to think about. What are the leadership behaviours that make the biggest difference in preventing sexual harassment in hospitality venues?
The leadership behaviours, I would say, are the leadership behaviours of the learners, or like leaders who really get on board and they, keep raising their understanding about what their duties are and how they can actually, manage those duties and comply with those duties. So having a learning mindset. I would say that strong risk management. So making sure that they understand, okay, well, what are our risk areas in hospitality, of which there are a lot of risk areas. And so understanding what they are and being like having a commitment, like that strong safety commitment to actually do something and to keep pushing to continually improve. I think also from a leadership behavior point of view is being a leader who is listening and thinking about things, listening and watching and keeping abreast of what's actually happening. And it's not, and understanding the importance of this being a safety issue as well. It's a safety hazard. It's been known as a safety hazard now in Australia for some time. So understanding that and thinking, okay, how can we work hard to prevent it? And the other one I would say is being a leader that people trust.
Yes.
Being a leader that people who role models good behavior. And that people feel safe to go and talk to about it. If they're worried about the way someone's even making them feel uncomfortable in the workplace, or if they're just worried about, it could be a patron, or it could be a chef, or it could be, it could be anyone really. It could be anyone in the workplace, and they feel uncomfortable, and they can speak up then, rather than kind of thinking that they have to put up with it and then you have an incident. So again, that strong leadership is, really important. I'd say they're the key things. Yeah.
And I think like in many organizations, there's always that chain of command, that organizational structure. Who do we go to? And I know, at times, over the decades, people said to me, but the person who's harassing me is my direct report. So what happens? We can't go to them, but they've also got a close relationship with the operations manager or the people and cultural manager, or perhaps are good friends with the CEO. They go out for dinners, so they feel like, well, who can I actually go to? Have you experienced scenarios, or not scenarios, true happenings like that, and how would you suggest that they deal with it?
I think, you've hit the nail on the head, Michelle, around that fear of speaking up. It's very real. A lot of people still, and we're talking about in Australia, we've done a lot of work in this space. We've got a long way to go. There's still a huge fear of speaking up. And exactly that, there's like that a bit of that power imbalance, or it's like, who do I speak up to? So I think, one of the key parts is really making sure that as an organization, we have different avenues for people to speak up. And it's a bit harder for the smaller ones, but certainly if you're not, if you are in that smaller organization and there isn't that avenue to speak up, or they don't even have a speak up process, then it's definitely looking externally. You might look at a health and safety regulator or an anti-discrimination body, because, you certainly don't want to be putting up with that, because it's obviously very harmful. Yeah,
and that's true. So there are external bodies that they can go to.
Definitely.
Which is important to be aware of, because I think a lot of people, they just leave the job. They just go, and then they'll go somewhere else. But as you were saying, right back at the start, they carry that with them though. It continues, and they're also leaving the next employee exposed to that same behavior, and that person hasn't been dealt with. From what have you seen in your work with hospitality organizations in particular, what separates those venues with that really strong, has that strong culture? They understand what it is, and they're working towards that better, and actually people are attracted to come to work to them because they have this strong culture and this understanding, from those that are still struggling.
Yeah, I think the difference is you've got organizations who, the ones who are struggling are the ones who sort of rely on hope. They kind of hope everything's going to be okay, and they sort of hope that their culture is going to be good, and they hope everyone's going to be safe. Because, I don't really work with, over my time, although there probably have been a few cases here and there, it's quite rare to work with an organization where, there might be that kind of sentiment that they don't care, they don't care about people. But the difference is in this space, and it's around all the different disrespectful behaviors, is hope is one thing and intentions are one thing. Like if we intend, I intend that everyone is safe in my workplace, it's actually what we do. It's actually what we do every single day, that makes a difference. So, your intentions are great. That's excellent. If, you're a good person, if you have that good intention. But in this space, when we talk about keeping people safe, we actually have to be doing things day to day. We have to be, like we've been talking about, walking the talk. We have to role model what we expect. We have to be very clear. What are our expectations? We need to build them out. We need to explain them, really early at the employment, at the start of that employment cycle.
Yes.
These are our expectations. Being very clear about speak up processes, like what does somebody do? What do you do if you feel like you're experiencing this behavior or you're feeling uncomfortable at that time? Who can you go to talk to? What is that speak up? What are those different avenues? What supports do you have in place? Again, really emphasizing that please come and speak up. It's very, very important. So if we do things like that, and then of course the organizations that actually understand this as part of risk management.
Yes.
So again, what are the risk areas and focusing on those, and then trying to do everything we can to control those. And the other thing that the organizations who are winning, who are really driving change, is they fix things. So they will, if they do have an unfortunate incident, or if they do have some poor behavior, or they do have those risk areas, they work at continually improving them and changing things, and to thinking, how can we, it might even be, where people stand, when we talk about in a bar or in a restaurant, it might be how we organize shifts and who we put on the shifts to make sure that people are safe. Yes. It might be that at that really late time at night that we do need to have that extra supervisor just to make sure that those doing that remote shift are being looked after.
Yes.
And really pushing support as well. So I think there are some of the key things, rather than the hope strategy, which in all areas of safety is not a good strategy. I would say it's probably a hopeless strategy. But I think they're probably the key things.
Yeah, and I love that. It is that hope strategy. Oh, well, we hope we know. Oh, we're sure. Well, we hope. Yeah, and you think it's true. That's what it's all about. I find it really interesting though with those that have been in those frontline positions, Karen, and then they move up. They start on that team leaders, supervisors, duty manager, maybe going to operations or whatever the structure may be in that organization. That they say to them, you are being watched by your team all the time, not just from the senior team, but those frontline team members. And it's the behavior that you're modeling is what they will replicate. And to me, I think they've even got to be instructed and have a training program. And I know, I'm going to ask you about these a little bit later, Karen, about understanding what those responsibilities are and how do you lead and manage a team, thinking about the safety and all the things that you have mentioned with smart culture, because they may not even have thought of it. They've got that many things in the learning to be a leader. It's more about that skill set, but to grow that team, it's having that right information, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. Like 100%, like understanding what, even like their leadership shadow is, and understanding that how do they, like exactly what you said, like practically, how do they walk the talk? And that's a skill, like some people are great at it. Like you said, I always say to, when we do sessions, I always say it's like when you're a leader, it's like you're on video all the time. It's like in a lot of hospitality venues they are, but they are literally on video to their staff, and the staff are watching them when things are good and when things aren't so good. And they're trying to work out, hey, do I feel safe around this person? Do I trust this person? But there is there's a strong responsibility from the organization as well, like to not hope that these leaders and emerging leaders, as we keep promoting them through the business, that they have that understanding of what that takes and what it takes to be proactive with regard to these behaviors. We can't just expect that. So 100% education is absolutely critical. Then we're setting them up for success, and we're giving them like tools and thoughts and practical ideas on how they can do it in the real world, day to day. Without that, again, we're relying on hope. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And hoping that they'll figure it out, and then going, oh look, it'll be all right. They'll learn along the way. Well,
Yeah.
that's not good enough. That's not a good enough practice for anyone concerned, the person themselves or certainly their team. In hospitality, it is an environment where you've got late shifts. It's in some cases it feels like it's 24 hours, 365 days a year. You've got a lot of different people coming into the organization, not just employees that you don't know, some that you do with the registered clubs. Of course, the members, there's all those, your locals, the people that turn up for the Friday night raffle or the Thursday, seniors lunch. But there are a lot of people that come into an environment like hundreds of thousands of millions of them, if you looked across a year period, they come into a hospitality venue. And what we find that there can be that really, it's a unique space, isn't it, when it comes to risk environment. When it comes to sexual harassment, what can we, without putting the fear into people, what do they have to be aware of coming in and working in an environment such as, hospitality, where you've got all these different people coming in when it comes to that?
Yeah, Michelle, I think that it's so true. Like we have that, we call it that third party dilemma. So you have all of these people coming in, like you said, that you may not know. We don't know their background. And then you might add alcohol in, and let's face it, some people are taking substances and stuff like that, which impairs people's judgment. So that is a huge risk factor for hospitality. So again, it's really looking through how can you risk manage that as much as we can. We can eliminate as much as we can. And I think obviously working with our people and getting to, ensuring that they understand that there is a commitment from the organization that we do not expect you to put up with this poor behavior. Whereas back when I was, again, back in the day, many moons ago, Michelle, you were very kind before. Was it a couple of years ago? It was a long time ago now. But it was almost just like it was expected, it was expected for you to sort of put up with that poor behavior and sort of like sometimes being touched and stuff like that. But you would walk past people and it was just like the way it was. So now it's like so important for, again, organizations to be clear on what are the expectations. Obviously, we expect, our employees to be respectful to each other. It's obviously very important. But we also expect that, patrons and clients and customers are respectful to you as well. And so the next part of that is ensuring that our people understand that if they ever feel uncomfortable, that we train them around that. If they feel uncomfortable, before we wait for something to happen, that please come and talk to a supervisor straight away if someone's making you feel uncomfortable. If something happened, it might be low level, but don't put up with it. And it could be that it might be that person that comes to the drawer every week. It might be a regular customer that we might be able to, discuss this issue with or deal with or ban, to be honest. So again, it's really raising that awareness about what to do in that situation. And so when we can, and also not only for the person who might be experiencing the behavior, but also for those around them. So imagine you've got a function on and you can see that one of the staff is, getting a bit of extra attention for whatever reason. And then you've got, we understand as a bystander, hang on a second, this doesn't look okay to me. I'm a bit worried about whoever that person is. What can I do to look after them, as a bystander? Maybe they cause a distraction or something like that. So understanding bystander intervention is really helpful as well. But I think, the main thing is that commitment that we explain to our people. We do not tolerate this poor behavior. It's not okay. So if it happens, this is from day one, this is what you do. And then of course it's role modeling that. So if we do see those poor behaviors, that as supervisors and leaders, that we listen and we have discussions and we fix things wherever we can. Otherwise, what you say at the start, it's not congruent with what you do. And so no one's going to speak up. Yeah. So I think things like that, having that strong speak up culture, having that strong action and having that support around for people as well, because there's no use having a reporting, avenue that goes to HR and then HR are not even there until, 3 days later when it gets right.
Yes.
Yeah. Making sure that that speak up process actually fits your organization. So who do you speak up? Maybe it is 11 o'clock at night. Maybe it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and something's going on or something's happening. What do you do in that moment? And making sure that the supervisors who are working at that time that they understand what their role is as well, you know,
Mm.
to be dealing with the issue very quickly. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about that bystander, it is so true. I know over the years I've had different members, and it's not just female gender. It is all, genders. I know I've had a lot of younger males who have said, it's embarrassing when they've got women, touching them or giving them their phone number, and you can sort of have that sense, oh, we'll just laugh it off, ha, ha, ha. But it's not
Yeah.
funny. It's really worrying. And I know they work really well in a team if they know there is a particular patron who, is perhaps that little bit more, flirtatious or feels that they have the right, to touch or make comments. The staff will actually, if it's a situation late at night and they can't ban that person or don't want, or what I'm trying to say is that there are times where there may only be two people and they're thinking, so well,
Yeah.
how are we going to handle this situation? So they may swap roles so
Yeah.
that they can ensure that they don't have to deal with that. But then, as you were saying, because HR may not be for another 3 days, it's reporting it correctly in that overnight shift or that shift report, and then the actual management getting onto it straight away, because it may well end up in that particular patron having to be banned. But it's at that time, I think, many of them think we've got to think about our own safety, the safety of the other patrons. How are we going to do this effectively? Therefore, that swapping out of that particular role can assist in a short-term fix, but it's that long-term fix which is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, that sort of distraction and definitely like in that moment, particularly if alcohol's involved as well,
Yes.
like if we try to have that discussion with somebody or, that serious discussion, it can just really cause things to escalate. And like you said, it's first. So that distraction is a perfect way to do it in the moment. If it's sort of behavior that's not, again, too serious as well, it might be that you're kind of like swapping the group around, but then you're, the staff around rotating people around. But then as the supervisor, we really must just be really keeping an eye on that.
Yes.
Not like, oh, okay, well, we'll put Joe in for Anna's spot or vice versa. And we sort of hope that everything will be okay. Then it's really making sure that we are watching and we're being even our presence is being, very clear that we're around and we're watching what's happening. I think that's so important. And then, like you said, it can be picked up at another time.
But being really mindful of it at the time, doing something, not just letting it go. Well, and I've heard over the years, well, it's their age. It was okay. They did it in the past. They don't realize it was very wrong. No, I'm sorry. That's not an excuse. They do know that it's wrong. Or if they don't, then it's letting them know. And I think that's another point I just wanted to chat with you about too, Karen, is that we can't accept somebody who we know having a joke and being seen by others of, oh, well, that staff member is accepting that behavior. You know, does that ever come up with your situations where, oh, well, but it's all right to be spoken to or to have that, touch or whatever, because I know them really, really well. But, how dare this other patron do that? I'm thinking, but you're sending cross messages.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. I think,
What are your thoughts?
yeah, I think like that consistency is really important. Just again, people knowing what to do if they do feel uncomfortable as well. And I think there has to be that consistency that if it's not okay for one patron to behave like that, why should it be okay for anybody else? Because again, what message does that send to our employees? And of course, we always say, like, if anything was to go wrong and we're sitting in a courtroom, we'd always say, oh, the safety is really important. Well, is it?
Yes.
How we're demonstrating that, and that we're letting it be okay for someone who might be a great patron and as in financially, but they're okay to, they can behave however they like. Yeah, definitely. We see that still coming through in the cases in Australia, where it might be those patrons that just think that they can do what they like, they can say what they like, and then sometimes the organizations or even the staff feel like they have to put up with it because that customer is a big customer to the group. So
Yes.
again, there has to be that consistency, and it has to be that the strength in the messaging, and we have to stick to it. Yeah, otherwise, like you said, it doesn't matter, does it? It's like anything sort of goes really. We have to be true to our word.
Yeah. And I think it's about being true to your word. You can have all these statements and have a safety policy in your employee handbook, which consists of, 68 pages that somebody's, briefly gone through and signed it, but it's actually living and breathing what that safety policy is. What does it mean in that organization? You talk a lot about building a strong speak up culture. What are the practical steps leaders can take this week to strengthen that?
Okay, so the strong practical steps would be making sure you have one, firstly, because I know a lot of organizations still, when we talk about nowadays, they still might not, again, they'll probably have lots of different policies and procedures on, how they're to serve alcohol and what's to happen here with, inspections and things like that. Or gaming. But when we talk about that speak up process for behaviours, often it's non-existent, or it might be that far back in the code of conduct that no one ever gets to it. Like you said, 68 pages. I think when we talk about having a great speak up culture, the first thing is, having that basic speak up where people can, they understand what to do. They understand what are the different avenues, and that actually covers their work scenarios as well, up to and including the police, if it's something that happens late at night and there's that immediate risk of danger and things like that. So we have the options, and then we bring it to life. So we have to make sure that we are training, that we are raising awareness on this and not waiting till someone's been working with us for 6 months, because then there's potential risk for them. They don't know what to do for 6 months, and they don't think it's that important because they haven't been taught about it. So really making sure that we're training our employees, we're training our new starters really at the start in that induction stage about what to do if something's not okay. If you ever feel uncomfortable, if ever anything is not quite right, if ever anybody engages in this poor behavior, speak up early. The other part to that, to having a strong speak up culture, is making sure that leaders are on board and they understand their role, so that senior leaders are walking the talk. And again, I've worked for a lot of organizations where they've had problems with that very senior leader level, where they haven't quite understood what their role is and they've behaved poorly in the past. So it's about getting them to make sure that they're walking the talk and that they are role modeling the great behavior, and that they promote that speak up as well. If they're involved in, say, for example, in induction, or they're involved with, having those bigger meetings with staff, if they are had, that the senior leaders focus on the importance of speaking up as well. It doesn't have to take a long time. Remember, everybody, it's great to catch up with you all today. We're here for you. It's always safety and respect first. So please always speak up if anything's not quite right. We'll support you. We've got your back.
Yes.
Yeah. 10 seconds. So that very strong message from a senior leader is so powerful. And then, of course, I think the next really important component, probably the last, is really around making sure that, anybody who may need to respond to something in the moment, such as a leader, supervisor, duty manager, that they understand what they do, what they have to do. And it's a skill, learning how to respond to an issue, particularly if someone is upset or they could be experiencing trauma. So understanding what their role is in that initial response. We don't need them to become Inspector Gadget and do this huge investigation in that moment, but understanding how they can, do that safe and respectful and supportive response is really important.
It is. I think that also, we're talking a lot about senior leadership and that management role, but there's also a number of organisations that I work with, registered clubs in particular, but even company businesses, owned by families, that have a board of directors as well. So they are just as important when it comes to modelling these behaviours, particularly if they are in the environment, in a hospitality environment, or on the workshop floor, whatever it might be. We've talked a lot, Karen, about that physical presence when we think of harassment or that safety in the workplace, that physical side of things. What about social media? These things that we constantly look at. There are so many groups that have, there's a lot of different channels that many organizations use, their staff to talk to each other, their rosters, swap rosters, shifts, etc. But there can be a lot of bullying. And I know a number of the clients that I've worked with have put in bullying and sexual harassment policies, not only physically, but also through media, through, whether it's emails, it's messages that are left in the staff room, or it is through these social groups, these groups that are supposed to be for work or outside of the organization. How, what are your thoughts on that? Because is it that the organization can only control those groups that come under the banner of the business, or and this is I know this is a question that came up quite recently with me, is that the CEO found out there is a group that is being set up by some staff that are really harassing other staff or making comments about them that aren't online with them because they haven't been invited to the cool group. How do you handle that? I know that's an off the cuff question, but I was just thinking about it. Yeah.
No, that's a really good one, and certainly in Australia, there can be liability, like personal liability for bullying and sexual harassment. If there is even, they can find like what's called a connection to the workplace. So it doesn't need to be a group that's set up, by the workplace, but of course, if it was, there'd probably be. Of course, we need to be very careful with those types of groups. Things like WhatsApp groups. I see a lot of trouble in WhatsApp groups. But I think it's really important that senior leaders and, HR, and as we go through that education process, that we talk about social media, that we say that the behavior that we expect extends beyond the workplace. And that includes on social media. It includes within these groups. And again, so just being very, very clear that there can be accountability there, and that what are the expectations? Because again, it's not okay. Like we've had plenty of cases in Australia where there's been activity on social media, and it might be a group that's, again, not formally organised. There was a Facebook group that wasn't formally organised by the organisation, but they had people commenting on there about people's body characteristics and things like that. That was found to be sexual harassment, notwithstanding the fact that not everyone was invited, that it was, a group of employees, but they were doing it in their own time as well. And so, I think, again, education is so critical, like understanding you can be held account for this. And also just going back to the fact that that kind of behavior is just not okay. Like, it's harmful. And, if we have those values, a lot of organizations have values and things like that we're clear on those, and that everything that we have, our rules extend to what could be that connection to outside of the workplace as well. So just to be very conscious of it. And I think, just having really strong rules around it as well. There is a group, there is expectation of, that people are respected within that group. And if there's anything that is found out, that the penalty can be up to and including dismissal, and also legal action can be taken for that. So I think if we're not upfront with people about that, and we I find in my experience, again, working on cases for a long time, often it's a case of people just don't know what they don't know. And often it can be younger workers as well who have, left school, and there's of course a lot of online bullying and things happening in school, and they go straight into a workplace, and they, the behavior sort of continues as well. There has to be that, okay, this is where this behavior, this is the expectation. I will not tolerate. There is a zero tolerance of this. So that really strong message backed up by that awareness. So people also understand what is bullying, what is harassment, what is sexual harassment. So they understand, okay, well, if I write that, I understand, because I've been trained, that this could be sexual harassment. So I'm fully doing this knowing that, that I've got that knowledge as well. So knowledge, that clear expectation from leaders. And I would say in the policies and procedures, talking about the connection to the workplace as well.
Thank you for that, Karen. And I was even thinking when you're saying, they come perhaps out of school, or perhaps even from another workplace where it's been acceptable, to make these comments on social media, or, their inside cool group. And it has to be right from the very start. This is, not saying that you do this, but you've got to be aware that, what behavior is being tolerated perhaps in workplaces or, at school is not tolerable here in the workplace, and really sticking to it, because we're seeing so much of it now. Of course, there's a policy for, children here in our country not to be on, social media channels. But I've just had over the weekend the birthday party for my 10-year-old granddaughter, and she had 8 little friends staying over after a very long day and a night. And my husband, who is not tech savvy whatsoever, because they all had their little iPads, he came up to me. He goes, I just walked past, and he goes, I heard one little girl going, oh, that's okay. I can give you the name of my hacker.
Oh no, 10. Oh, let me airdrop it to you.
But it was just so
Oh,
funny. He goes, what are they hacking? I said, this is
oh
trying to, well,
God,
this is getting around it. And of course, I mean, we are adults. We've
we
all
are in
been kids
trouble.
at once. We're
Yeah.
all going to get around that policy. But I'm thinking if that's the mindset in a nice, fun, the really nice little girls, but
Yeah.
that's the same as in the workplace. There are ways that you can, hack and, get around it, but it is still bullying and it impacts everybody. And I think it's the cruelest thing, and not putting it to make it light. But I know, my grandmother there's always that old saying, if you can't say anything good about somebody, then don't say it at all. And I think that is so true. And if you can't say it in front of them, to their face, then
Mm.
don't say it online. And I think the really easy lines to just to say out loud, but I think they are the heart of everything, because a lot of people can say a lot of things when that's here, and we see that every day, don't we?
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
but look, how can, and we don't want this to be, such a heavy episode, but I want you to be, perhaps just a couple of tips. Karen, I know you've given us so many through this episode, but can you talk through how leaders can respond to concerns safely? Because remember, a lot of them perhaps have never even been bullied or have, but thought, oh, well, it was at a time when we've gotten through it. But how, can they handle these concerns of safely and supportively, with their team members should something arise? I think we've always got this assumption, oh, well, they're the CEO, they'll know what to do, but they're human as well, aren't they?
Oh, for sure. And again, I think that's a skill set, isn't it? It's just understanding what your role is in that moment. I think the first thing is it's very hard in the moment to fix everything. And
Yeah.
so really in that moment, it's like you're that first responder. It's really about making sure that person is safe. That's the first thing. It's always safety first. Like if they're not with you and they're calling you and saying something's not okay and they're upset. So safety first. If they are with you and they're really, crying, and if they're quite upset at that moment, it's just keeping them safe, getting them to a place. Maybe it's an area you can talk to them a bit more confidentially. And it could be even, depending on how upset they are, or they could be experiencing trauma. Safety might mean getting the medical attention as well. So it's really going to depend on, what the facts are in the case and the situation. The second part is being as supportive as possible, like understanding how hard it is. And it might be somebody who's been putting up with it for some time, but
Yes.
now we've been telling them to speak up from the first day of their employment. And now they've come to speak to us. So it's really being supportive. And the first thing I always say is, if somebody does come to talk to you, to say thank you. Thank you so much for coming and telling me about this, because we can't fix it if we don't know about it.
Yes.
Thank you. And again, did you see how my even the tone of my voice changed then? So I'm just taking it down a notch. I'm listening. Tell me a little bit about what's been happening. If someone is really traumatized, really upset, you can get the details later. If it was an incident that happened, is in a club or something like that involving a patron, we might need to push to get a bit more information. But again, that might need to wait. It depends on how that individual is. Being supportive and really listening, giving that person time. I know in hospitality, and I remember working in hospitality for like 12 years. It can be so hectic, again, you might have that moment where it's really, like you're in between sort of entree and dessert and there's things happening all over the place. But it really is making sure that we dedicate time to that person as soon as you can. Maybe we could set them up with somebody else in that absolute, that in that moment, but really trying to wherever we can, get that person to safety, listening to them, giving them that safe space to calm down, to talk with them, not judging what they're saying as well is really important. Like just being very careful that we're not being prejudicial, or we're not sort of saying, we're not, promising outcomes, or, we're not assuming that everything has happened exactly how they've said it, because there's always two sides to a story. And again, doing a lot of investigations in this space, sometimes I'll start an investigation and I'll think what that person's telling me is absolutely correct. And then I do the investigation, and then I'm hearing that, there's a lot more to the story. So just really listening at that point. So keeping them safe, being supportive, and listening. Just, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Do you mind if I take a note of that? I'd always sort of stick to pen to paper because people get nervous when we use technology as well.
Yes.
So if you can get a few of the basic facts, and then it's really at that point, again, we're like a first responder. So how can I support this person right now? And so what does it mean, for the rest of the shift? If they're too upset, obviously we're not going to put them next to a person or put them back at a table involving something that's just happened. Maybe it might be getting a friend to sit with them. Maybe it might be getting them to safety. Again, it really depends on the situation. And then wherever we can, getting those basic facts. And of course, so important from a legal point of view, but also just from that factual point of view, to take down a bit of a note. Like even if someone was to say to us, I don't want you to take any notes, as a leader after the conversation, the leader is well within their rights, certainly in Australia, to write a note of that conversation. It's really important to have that contemporaneous record. And then, of course, from there, it's really getting some guidance on, okay, what do we need to do? And again, obviously, in the moment, if it's a serious incident involving a patron, we might need to be escalating it quicker and getting that involvement of, security and sometimes the police to really, make sure that we can ensure the person who is involved in the behaviour is held to account, and, we know sort of what's happening there. But yeah, safety and support facts and report, they're the key parts there. And yeah, understanding we can't fix everything usually in the moment.
Yes.
There's a lot of law and a lot of case law in this area that we need to be very careful of, making sure that people have that fair process. Again, thinking about it, if it's an employee who's the subject to the allegations as well. So making sure that we're listening, but we're not being prejudicial. We're not sort of promising outcomes. We're not promising how long things will take to look into if we need to investigate it and things like that. And if somebody, I think one of the key things, and this is a question we get asked in our sessions pretty much every time we do a leader session, is that if somebody was to say to you, this is happening to me, say maybe it's a harassment by, in my experience, it was being harassed by a chef, but I don't want you to do anything about it. I would just be very, very, very careful in that situation. And just to understand, obviously in Australia, certainly, and I'm sure in a lot of the other parts of the world, we have those very strong duties, safety duties to our people. And if we know that if someone's being exposed to that behavior, we really have to tread very carefully here. And in some cases, there will be situations where we will need to do something. But of course, we really push and prompt you to get advice and guidance on the best way to manage that situation, rather than be that secret keeper. And like you said earlier, Michelle, that if we don't deal with it, then we are potentially exposing that person to re-exposing that person for it to continue to happen, or they might leave, and then it just then revolves onto somebody else, and it might be someone who's not as strong or not as stoic. And then of course we've seen obviously lots of very serious cases. So really important to know that if we have that reluctant complainant, to make sure you get some advice on how you can deal with that situation, so that you're making sure that you're complying with your duties as well as a leader.
I think you made some really great points. Thank you so much, Karen, there, that the person that you're speaking to doesn't have all the answers. And I think, a lot of leaders feel that they do need to have all the answers, and they need, particularly those that fall into the pattern of they love helping people, and they can go down into this rabbit warren of taking all this responsibility on them, and perhaps even the burden of what this problem is, and it worries them. And then, but it's not. They try to help, but it may not be the right help. And I think, made a really good point there, that leaders also can go to organizations or like yourself, Karen, with Smart Culture, and ask for advice or bring you in, but also telling that person, if they're the leader and that employees come to them, perhaps that they need to go and have a conversation with, whether it's a psychologist or it's a hospital, just a local GP or whoever it might be, and knowing that they're not able to fix everything. But what is beautiful, as you said right at the very start, thanking them for bringing it to your attention, because now at least you can start the process of ensuring that this won't happen again to them, or ensuring that they get help, or, whatever that pathway is. I think that's important, because too often I hear from leaders, Karen, going, oh, well, I've taken all this responsibility on and now I don't know what to do. So, and it's hard, it's not easy for them at all at times.
Yeah, it's not easy. And I think something else you just mentioned there as well is it's a lot of leaders will then have all of this information, and it kind of weighs them down. They're thinking they're trying to fix everything. But something that I always say to our leaders is that, like, often when people go through things like this, they might be experiencing trauma. They might not be going very well with their mental health. And I think something to be very acutely aware of is the fact that our role in that moment is obviously to be supportive. But like we said, we can't necessarily fix that person or fix what's happening. And so really making sure that they get the support they need is so important. Some organizations have like employee assistance programs that we can group them in with, other emotional support agencies, depending on where they're located. Because, they may need a psychologist. And I always say that if they tell us and then we don't sort of help them to get that help, then and we try to do that all ourselves, if we're not qualified, it's very hard for us to do that. So I think, understanding, I guess, the limit there, and it is great that they've told you, but again, where's that supportive leader? And I think really escalating, getting help from, where, if your organization has that structure where you can escalate it, I think, getting some guidance on how we can do it, but very sensitively and very carefully, because you've got somebody who's going through something that we have to be so careful with that information.
A person who's actually living and breathing. It's not, it's somebody there. So before we finished, what gives you hope? We're nearly at the end of 2025. We're coming into another amazing year next year, 2026, which I'm sure will fly by just even quicker. But what gives you hope?
I think what gives me hope is, I think what I'm seeing actually is like just seeing the shift, like when I started Smart Culture 10 years ago, and I did work with some hospitality groups back then, there was a lot of, this is a bit of a tick and flick. Oh, we've got to do this because we've had a case, and no one's really interested. No one really understands how important it is. But now, like working with hospitality groups, I did a big super session, literally with, I think must have been 40 venues. It was quite an interesting one in Sydney not long ago. But just seeing the shift in how people are interested and how they're interested in changing things, and the conversations that we're having, I think is great. And I think, it's just that definitely gives me hope, again, going from obviously where I've been over my time when I was younger. But that definitely gives me hope that things are shifting. We're not there yet, but there's definitely, I think we are really heading in the right direction.
Which is wonderful news. So it's the right sort of hope in that.
I think so. I think so.
Definitely. We've touched on, I know I've mentioned you've got different training programs, but you're also a phenomenal conference speaker, Karen, and then through your organisation, Smart Culture. For the listeners here in Australia, how can they utilise your services here? But also for my global listeners, how can they perhaps get in contact with you as well to speak at their events?
Thank you, Michelle. I've got two websites. So I've got my Smart Culture, so my business website that has a lot of the training there. So that's just smartculture.com.au, or I've got a keynote speaking website. It's karenmaher.com.au as well. So if you're looking for that keynote style, session or information, so it's pretty easy to contact me, I think.
Wonderful. Well, I'll put both those links in to the show notes. I'd like to thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your expertise today and your knowledge, coming from that hospitality era. And what I love is how that moment in time, even though how painful it would have been, and I'm sure still resonates with you at times, is that you have turned it around. You've made it positive in creating a wonderful organization through Smart Culture and the people that you speak to when you're on the stage, in showing them that it doesn't have to be that way, and that we're moving forward, not only as women, but as men, women, all genders, but in all positions, both in leadership and in frontline. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. It's been an absolute pleasure to catch up.
Take care.
Thank you.